Darn.
Ooh, Linda.
Darn.
Linda, are you broken hearted?
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
everybody's
I just said I'm not Republican.
Okay, so when they're doing this, they go crazy.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
He is slowly but purposely escorted over to and seated in the wooden chair, like the time once before. Straps are drawn and buckled around his ankles and forearms, just like the time once before. A man cloaked in a black robe steps to the chair and mumbles a few words, like the time once before. Another man walks over to the switch and pulls it down in one sweeping motion, as he did once before. Only this time, unlike before, the inevitable current, enough current to cook an elephant from the inside out, surged through Willie Francis's body. And this time he would not walk away, as he did once before. On May 9th, 1947, Willie Francis was sentenced to die in the electric chair for the second time in as many years. And this time the death machine would perform its intended task. What you just heard was an account of the proceedings that occurred at the Louisiana State Correctional Facility 47 years ago. I did not read it to make you feel sympathy, nor did I read it to make you feel guilt. After all, this was a convicted murderer. But the reason I did was to show you what can happen when the role of God is played out by incompetence. And one reason why the death penalty should be abolished. In the next few minutes, I will concentrate on 5 main contentions on the issue of capital punishment, and the 5 points are as follows. Number 1, incapacitation. 2, as a deterrent. 3, as vindication for the victim and family. 4, the question of moral hypocrisy. And finally, and most significantly, number 5, the problem of wrongful execution. I'll begin the discussion with the idea of incapacitation. It is an obvious fact that a dead man cannot commit a crime. But just as obvious is a man sentenced to a maximum security facility for the rest of his natural life is rendered as harmless as a dead man. And in states where the death penalty is abolished, much, much cheaper. It winds up costing the taxpayer a significantly lower price to house a convicted murderer than it does to have the necessary variables intact for the death penalty. This is mostly due to the tremendous amount of court time devoted to the appeal process whenever the death penalty is involved. Because when it comes to the finality of death, the system bends over backwards to find a just decision. As Justice Robert H. Jackson stated in 1953, when commenting about the particularly lengthy murder trial, piled high with appeals by the defense, he said, when the penalty is death, we, like state court judges, are tempted to strain the evidence and even in close cases the law in order to give a doubtfully condemned man another chance. The byproduct of this apprehension to find a man guilty when it comes to capital punishment is more of a burden put on an already overtasked judicial system, something we can't afford to do. Then there is the aspect of the death penalty as a deterrent. That fact has yet to be established, simply because of the inconsistent use of it. Even though the death penalty is still legal in most states, it is so infrequently used, that it doesn't act to deter anyone from anything. A parallel might be drawn from a situation where a parent threatens to punish a child for misbehavior by sending him or her to their room. But when the act of misbehavior occurs, only punishing them some of the time, while the majority not punishing them at all. Psychologists would suggest this type of inconsistency doesn't act to deter the child simply because the child isn't able to establish a direct and absolute correlation between misbehaving and punishment. So in effect, what happens is the child doesn't consider the threat a valid one, then rather chooses to ignore it as a realistic possibility. You might say to me, well, we aren't talking about children when it comes to executing a convicted murderer, and you would be correct. But we are always observing the system through TV and radio news programs, and we see the inconsistencies quite clearly. And when one speaks of inconsistencies, hypocrisy is not far behind. There is an overwhelming feeling that capital punishment acts as a vindication for the victim and loved ones. And this is a premise that I think we all can agree on, even myself. When I watch the 10 o'clock news and I see a story of a 12-year-old boy who killed a 6-year-old child because he wouldn't steal candy for him, it sickens me as well as anyone else. When I see a mother confessing to drowning her 2 little boys because her boyfriend doesn't like kids, I feel the same frustration that many of you feel. But we need to look at what is happening here. To suggest that anyone be killed for any reason is morally questionable, even if it feels justified. After all, in the minds of the people that kill, it is a justifiable reason for the act of murder. Granted, it may be sick, twisted, and diabolically insane, it is a reason nevertheless. And when we turn the tables on the killer and become the very thing which we detest, we are no better than the accused. Which brings us to the next main point, the serious hypocrisy of capital punishment. Everyone here knows what happened to Jeffrey Dahmer, beaten to death by fellow inmates just days ago. Our first reaction may have been a gleeful one, maybe even an audible cheer, a feeling of justice served. But was there also a feeling of guilt that may have directly followed? A feeling that to cheer or rejoice in any taking of a life by another may in itself be wrong. The history of capital punishment in Western civilization is said to have begun with the murder of Socrates in Athens around 399 BC, and truly achieved its ultimate and grave injustices when a man named Jesus Christ was executed in Jerusalem in 30 AD. Now, to anyone who is a believer in the aforementioned faith, there is a serious question of moral hypocrisy that must be dealt with on a strictly personal basis. But even more importantly is the question of hypocrisy on the level of a national conscience. Capital punishment goes against the very core of the Constitution. It violates human rights like no other single act, and is carried out by the very entity that is instilled with the power to protect those rights. The right to life is the supreme right of all human beings, and for anyone to take that right away, especially in the name of government, is to make a mockery of the Constitution. The men that gave their very lives to fight for these rights are being ridiculed by this senseless argument, not to mention the taxpayers who pay for capital punishment. Since tax money pays for the electricity that powers the electric chair and the cyanide capsules that are used in the gas chamber, then each and every one of us is also guilty of paying for murder, a kind of reluctant assassin. And this may be all right with those of you who favor the death penalty, but what about the question of executing an innocent man? Which brings us to the final and most important points. Wrongful death committed by the state. In the book In Spite of Innocence, Michael Raidleg, a professor of sociology at the University of Florida, and Hugo Vidal, philosophy professor at Tufts University, illustrate a case-by-case description of 400 believed innocent people who were either sentenced to death or life imprisonment in the United States in the last 90 years. Once again, this begs the question, do we have the right to decide who lives or dies? In 1882, Illinois executed 3 of the Haymarket anarchists, August Spies, Adolf Fischer, and George Fisher, only to have them all later exonerated by the governor. This being one of the rare incidents where an error in putting a person to death was admitted to in public. And when one believes in capital punishment, one must also accept that there will be mistakes. Innocent people will be put to death, and the guilt will fall on each and every one of the people in this room. So you see, for all these reasons, a civilized society should not practice the heinous crime of state-funded murder. Yes, it serves to incapacitate, but this can be done with life sentences just as well. No, it does not act as a deterrent. The fact that the murder statistics continue to rise is a direct indication of that. Yes, it serves as vindication to the victim and family, but at what cost? We raise our children to be compassionate, not that revenge is the answer. And the tremendous moral hypocrisy that is created is ridiculous at best. But above all, the thought that one innocent man sent to die in the electric chair is a sobering one. And one day, that one man or woman could be you or somebody you love. Till the infallibility of human judgment have been proved to me, I shall demand the abolition of the death penalty. Marquis de Lafayette.